Good afternoon, all. Thank you for coming. My name is Laila Sid. I'm a PhD candidate of the GHS group here in UPC. And today we will present the work that I've been developing with my supervisors, Albert Ford and Xavi Sanchez Villa, and collaborator, Dr. Nura Robert. So the question is, how can we use numerical groundwater modeling and social sciences to the achievement of water access to all? First, I will discuss a little bit the motivation context, the introduction, a theoretical framework where I will present the three main parameters of this indicator, the weighting and aggregation methods that we use, and then I will present the application in a case study in KWALE country. The data, I will present the data that was available, the applications, the scenarios, and finally discussions, conclusions, and further steps that we're taking from here. So, water stress has broad-reaching consequences that could impact since food security, global health, or like environmental health, human health, economic development, even trigger a humanitarian crisis due to big conflicts or migrations. In 2020. 2 million people lack safely managed water, but groundwater has some pros and advantage to provide universal access. For example, aquifers could be found mostly everywhere, and most of them have major storage capacity. It also has buffer capacity that makes them less vulnerable to variability in climate. Also, in rural and remote areas, that is where we are focusing our research, shallow groundwater is generally more accessible than surface water due to the cost that infrastructure have in allocation and of surface water. So in 2015, the Sustainable Development Goals focus the goals in the concept of leaving no one behind. This means to focus also in marginalized communities such as the rural and remote areas. The concerns on those specific areas are related with the low level of services, the functionality or non-functionality of the services, and the system sustainability. So in 2015, there was a project called Unlocking Africa Groundwater Potential, in which this department and this group was involved. Actually, Nuria Ferrer made her PhD thesis from here. And this proposal, this research, is focused in the continuation of the knowledge and of the advances that were made under this context. This research is funded by the UPC Center of Cooperation and Development. And so, as introduction, the indexes are a common way to monitor the status of a system and to make scenarios and see the evolution of these systems can be used as policy tools and assist decision-making processes. So, common drawbacks that we found on specific water scarcity and stress indexes were the methodology in which the components and subcomponents were defined, lacking of statistical strength. The lack of interdisciplinarity approach, being the indexes or too social qualitative build or too technical and physical system build. So nothing really mixing both of the components. Also lacking the flexibility to be adaptable to different hydrological contexts or socioeconomical. There are a lot of indexes made specifically to a country or to a region. And a lack of transient or time-dependent approach that could allow the seasonal analysis or the construction of scenarios. And in this case, in groundwater, we lose the advantage of or the importance of addressing the groundwater budget and the change of the groundwater budget if it's static. Also, most of the indexes focus on national, regional, or global levels and not in a local scale, making all of the marginalized communities invisible in this in using this kind of indexes. So the theoretical framework that we present is a tool to address the risk of an individual user that how it could or would experience groundwater shortage in a local scale. So we take the benefits of the groundwater numerical modeling and implementing different context scenarios. The approach is user-centered, so the focus on the main study objective is the household of a community. So there are several households, of course, and this pretends to serve identifying critical areas in which no water supply is occurring or could occur. The three main parameters defined were closeness, availability, and sustainability, and they work as layers that you could overlap in a GIS environment. So for closeness and availability, a lot of formulas could be used or thought, and we are using this one. There is a simple one. So we have C, there is closeness as an indicator. D, there is the Euclidean distance in kilometers between the user and the water point. Alpha, that is like no matter what factor. That is a factor in which, regardless the distance of a hand pump, the user will always go, since it's it would be the pump that is more close to them, or in which he has facilities to go. For example, I will put just an example. If a household has their children in a school, and in that school they have a hand pump, doesn't matter if it's farther than another one, but that one, it's easier to him to go and fetch, because he needs to go and leave their children in the school. Understand? So it's this kind of parameters. Beta is a factor that modifies the perception of closeness of the user as a function of the distance. The availability is where the groundwater model comes, or we use the groundwater model, and it's related with the hydrological background. So it's the access to physical water. Let's say we have a borehole that we have actually water in the borehole, and that it could be also in a safety quality and in enough quantity. So it's a linear function of between the water column. The case of sustainability is a complex factor that has been studied previously in different contexts, because it has a really strong social component and a physical component. So sustainability is is how it's that the water point and the pump could connect the groundwater and the user in a sustained time period. So it comprises two important things. That is not only that the pump works, that the well is well performed. We say yes. But also it depends on the community. Most of in these cases in rural water access, most of the wells and pumps and hand pumps are community managed. So it's important how the social arrangements, the water committee, how does it work, the participation of all of the members of the community, etc. So we can subdivide sustainability in a hardware functionality and in a software functionality, both depending on time. The hardware functionality is, we would say, a bias parameter, which depends only on the structure and the well itself and the pump itself. So, for example, there's an Bonser has presented an approach, a tiered approach, in which you say, water point provides water, yes or no, and then you start making a flow diagram where yield and reliability appears. So then in the end, you can classify a hand pump from abandoned to fully functional, depending if it's working more of 30 or days in the year or not, and if it's giving sufficient quantity of water or not. And in the case of low flow functionality, it's important to understand the background and the context of the water management arrangements. So here, we propose the use of surveys. There's several examples of surveys, but there's one in this in the area of the study that I will present further, in which a lot of we divided all of the surveys answers in 18 categories of topics, of water topics, and from these surveys we can do a multivariate data analysis and multi-factor analysis to know which are the most important or representative variables of the system, keeping as much as data variation as possible. And actually, the analysis was the one that I presented last year in this room. And for the weighting and aggregation, both have significant effects on overall composite indexes. In the case of weighting, no weights were used due to that all of the indicators are normalized and they're independent between each other. Also because of the data-specific methodology, so each time we have more data, the indicator could be updated, and in this case, the weights should stay the same. So when you not use weight, then you don't have that. And to avoid also subjectivities or arbitrariness in the weighting processes, for example, judgment-based experts or participatory approaches. In the case of the aggregation method, we use a high penalty aggregation method and that avoid compensability effects. Compensability effects means that if, for example, closeness, you have a high scoring closeness and a low scoring average, if you use another aggregation method, the indicators would compensate between each other. And with the geometrical aggregation, you don't have that problem either. So KWALE County is located in the southernmost coast of Kenya. It has a well-developed history of water resource governance since in the 70s. The government started implementations of these hand pumps in most of the communities or a lot of the communities. So, and from there, a lot of research has been ongoing. So it's it's not easy, but you can obtain good data. Then most of the pillars of the water supply system, groundwater supply system, are hand pumps or shallow wells and boreholes. 82% of the population lives in rural areas. It has a dry period between January and March and July and September, and long rains between April and June, and short rains between October and December. And to give an example of problems of drought, between July and September of 2022, about 3.1 million people were facing in Kenya, were facing acute food insecurity, driven by, between other things, the 4th below average rainy season, so they've been 4 years with drought, below average crop production to near crop failure, and this has raised some localized resource-based conflicts also. So the data available was a conceptual groundwater model, that is the one here. It comprises 2 aquifers, shallow unconfined aquifer from the Pleistocene, and deep Jurassic aquifer. The deep is confined, and it has an aquitard layer between both. And in this area, there are a couple of fallow channels that allow some mixing between the 2 aquifers. And all of this information was also entered in a numerical groundwater model that was a transient model from November of 2010 to December of 2017 that was made by Nuria and also more data available was the surveys made by KWALE et al. In 2020, but the surveys rounds were made between 2013 and 2016. So here you can see in blue the hand pumps that were identified, and in green the households that were supplied by these different hand pumps. As I told you before, the surveys were divided, like the survey questionnaire was divided in 18 groups, asking these kind of questions or these kind of topics in organization. For example, if an institution is helping, or which which is the organization type in which they manage the groundwater. Questions related to income, which were the main drinking source in the wet and in the dry season. They are separated. The participation in the committees, what happened after the hand pumps breaks, how they do the maintenance, if they have an insurance, types of services, how do they pay, etc. So applying the index in the case of 2014, we choose 2014 because we have the survey round in December 2014. And so first we have the closeness, that in general it has good scores. This is because of the efforts of constructing hand pumps in the area since the 70s, more or less. So the parameters, like the factors chosen or used were alpha 0.1, because we saw this kind of behavior in which users went to boreholes not limited by the distance, even if they have 4 or 5 kilometers. That is something that it usually is not like that. Usually in literature, the maximum distances that people travel should be between 1.5 or 2 kilometers. And the 0.8 factor was estimated minimizing the difference between the percentile rate of the average distance to the hand pump and the average of the closeness indicator. Then in the case of the availability results, we set the safe level in January 2014, because January was the start of the dry season after a normal wet year, average year. And the evaluation was for, as I said before, December of 2014. And in the case of the harvest functionality, the results were obtained from the survey. There was a question of, for the hand pump specific, not to the household, if the hand pump was working, since when, and if it gives enough quantity, or all the questions that I previously mentioned in the tiered approach. Then for the software functionality, a multiple factor analysis was developed. These are exactly the same results that I presented last year, in which there were 4 main variable groups which were related with functionality. So it was the maintenance, the organization, the main drinking source, and what happens after the hand pump break. The maintenance, the type of questions was, has the hand pump been repaired the last 10 months? If they were satisfied by the maintenance or not. The organizations was which institutions that did help them to organize. So there was like the categories could be the communities, it was individual or private well, NGOs, research groups, or things like this kind of answers. In the case of main drinking source, the question were which were the main drinking source in the dry or wet periods, and if these sources were improved or not. And also after the hand pumps break, which was the main source of drinking water after the break. With the multiple factor analysis, then we estimate that the ponderation of each one of these variable groups was this. No. And then we are studying this map. Because something good about the multiple factor analysis is that it gives also a contribution for each category or answer that you have of the questionnaire. You have the contribution in a dimension. So then you can calculate a score considering the four variables and the ponderation. And as application results, in general, this is the final index all computed. In these patterns, show which is the minimal indicator in each area. So, for example, here we can see that the score is 0 because of the availability, and here you can see that it's the availability. For example, here also the range is between 0.3, and it's related with the hardware functionality, etc. So in this way, decision makers could, or institutions can focus on which are the areas of lacking groundwater access. So for example, all of this part is because there's no groundwater in the well, like the groundwater level is below the depth of the wells. But here we can see like a heterogeneous behavior in which the main factors influencing the lack of water access can be software analysis, software functionality, or hardware functionality, etc. So as a validation effort, we, with these results, validate that there's no significant correlation between availability, sustainability, and closeness. Sustainability was the indicator with the most amount of minimum values. However, availability was the most restrictive ones because the average score of those households where sustainability was the most minimum was 0.49, while availability was 0. Just because, as I told you before, there's a lot of areas in which the groundwater is below the borehole depth. And you can find, like, you can make a tailored analysis in which you can see, for example, that all of the households with lowest score of software functionality are supplied mainly by unimproved drinking water, mainly surface water, and that the hand pumps in which they rely, they are not managed neither by institutions or communities, and some of them, even the half of them, scored high in availability and closeness. So it's only matter of sustainability that the water access is lacking. So here, at the index as a predictive tool, we have a random 20% of the functional hand pumps turned into non-functional. This is not that interesting, actually, this scenario, because as the closeness was one of the parameters with high rate, the impacts are very specified, located, and this is not a general change, it's something really specific. And in the case of availability, a change in availability, we simulate 3 years, first, like the basis scenario, and 3 years with a 90% reduction of the annual rainfall, followed by 3 years with a surplus. This was, and here you can see the percentage difference maps. So the idea of this was to see the impacts and then the recovery of the system with a strong change in climate. That is not as hard to imagine since now they've been in a 4-round period of drought. And you can see that there are places with a slow recovery, and the impact is more generalized. Actually, 30% of the area of the households were affected by this in this scenario. So for the discussion, closeness, well, we think that we achieved the flexibility and the adaptability in closeness with these two factors that give a little bit of the perspective from the user of how they perceive the closeness. There's a lot of literature in this area because some people use the distance, but there are also people that use the time they spend fetching water. The availability, also, well, we have this time-dependent variable using the groundwater model. And in the case of the sustainability, with dividing in hardware functionality and software functionality, we can address the social sphere in one and keep like the unbiased functioning of the system in the another. So the potential for community, another thing interesting is that this tool could be useful through, or more used through community science. In the case of the software functionality, since they are all surveys that measure the perception of the population with an app in a mobile device, you could upload or refresh this parameter. Another point of discussion was the subjective components of the surveys. So you can have contradictory answers between, like for the same compound between different households. And then we think that in this case, it's important when in case those answers given by the actual users. For example, it's common that the women are the ones that fetch water in these, or the children also, which fetch water in these cases. And another important thing is the decoupling structure of the index. So sustainability is related with the functionality of the system, the availability with the climate of the area, and closeness with demographic changes. They are statistically independent, but a major change, for example, a strong migration or moving or even coming or going out of the area, and also a strong climate change could affect and affects more than just one of them, even if they are independent. So as a conclusion, this is a tool that helps defining rural areas that are or could be suffering water access shortage, identifying the main causes, and helping decision makers with quantifiable and simple data. It incorporates a broad range of variables. The composite structures allow detailed understanding in the failure modes and social processes that explain this. It works also as a centralized database, since most of the wells that are located, they are not monitoring in a systemic way, or there is not a network of monitoring. And the local scale can be applied in order to address marginalized communities in a rural context. So now what we are doing is a comparative research considering Kenya, but also these other three locations in Ethiopia, Uganda, and Malawi, where we can find similar information, similar data, in social and technical. So we want to make a comparative research of these 4 different rural environments. And after that, there's a field work in Kenya, in KWALE, where the idea is to to make an agent-based model to determine the risk of no water access due to saltwater intrusion. This means that, for example, the users, when they drink the water and the water is salty and they change, they're forced to change the behavior, how this will impact the system. Not only here, we are not only to consider the households, but also the main stakeholders, the minery, the agricultural, and the tourist stakeholders. And we'll implement the groundwater model that you already see and a behavioral model, but this is really preliminary. Thank you for your time.
Yes, yes.
I have a question regarding the alpha parameter. You said, if I understand well, you said that it's kind of parameter that weights the importance of distance.
I say it in the different, like the one with the importance of the distance is beta. I'm sorry, I just missed that.
Okay.
And alpha is more related with geographical factors.
Okay. But it's the same. The alpha and the beta
No,
are okay, because we saw like this 0.1, but I assume that if you are in certain region, you have an alpha and beta different than
Yes.
other.
yes,
But it would be nice. You can have a picture, a graph,
yes,
C versus the distance.
Yeah.
This is exponential, I think.
yes, it is.
So if your distance is very far away, then C is equal to alpha.
Exactly, 0.1.
And if your distance is 0, then your C is 1. So it goes from 1
Yeah.
to alpha.
So the 0.1 is actually like this no matter what, because no matter how far it will be, there will always an amount of people that will grow.
But this change, eh?
Yeah, this change. Yeah, that's why it's flexible. The idea is that it could be applied here and it could be applied in another rural context in another part of the world. So yeah.
I have a little bit related to this because what does closeness mean? I mean, is it how many people will go to the pump?
Yes.
If it's 1 kilometer or half kilometer?
Yes. I don't understand the question.
Yeah. No, because you could also say something like
time. There, it could be.
How bad is it or how good is it? More how good is it to have a pump close to you or something?
Yes. Yeah. The thing is, if you take the approach of how good it is,
but this is something that you can really measure. If it is how many people would go to the pump, if it's so many distance, then in theory at least you could measure it.
Yes, but you need the data for that. It's like empirical. Like once you already have the data, you can calculate the factors and everything. But we don't have like a methodology to calculate it. And the idea is to keep that.
What could you measure in this equation? The D?
The main, like
the alpha, beta, and C, can you measure?
D is the one that you can really measure with like in distance, in kilometers. And alpha and beta, you cannot measure like in field, but when you have the data related with which, like the household has a reference pump and you know the distance, and then you make the graph and you see in which moment, no matter which is the distance, the users are still going. So that's a way to calculate that.
Sort of, the C. You can measure the C, how many times people go to the pump.
I don't know how many people go. No, how many times go. Or we didn't consider it. Maybe we can see it.
But you guess some alpha. Some.
Yes.
It depends on the demographics, or I mean the beta depends on the demographics or the density of the city. Or
alpha depends on demographics. Demographic. Yeah, see alpha.
And you estimate it by using the questionnaires you sent to the.
Yes.
And if I understood well, in the map you showed, the main factor that limited the availability, well, not the availability, but the possibility to use water was the closeness in most of the,
Sorry, what?
in the map.
This?
No, the next one.
This.
Yes. Here,
Mhm.
this not meant that the main restrictive
Is
was
availability.
availability, okay.
Yes.
Okay. And what's the scale of the map, like, to give an idea? I mean, in the areas which have a low index,
Mhm.
maybe it's because they have bad availability.
Yes.
And how can they, like, stay there in the now if they have such a bad index?
Mhm. They usually use alternative water sources. So they use boiled water or use another pump that is, they use bottled water, surface water. They pay for water basically
Okay.
from another sources. And it changes a lot between dry season and wet season. Like there's people, and most of the people use groundwater during the drought or during the dry period, but in the wet period they use rainy water or they use rainwater or other sources.
So how would you explain that the areas with a higher index, since that the software is always this important indicator in this area? If I understand correctly, these blue areas, these are the best quality index of
Yes,
access to water.
yeah,
And you indicate there that is the software the lowest, the minimum indicator in this case.
yes. It's the lower indicator, but the average, even like the average of the software scores in the lowest one, in the ones that in these ones, in the blue ones, or the ones in the points, sorry, it's around 0.78. It means that all of the other like closeness and availability was higher than 0.78. So there are communities that are there. Okay, there's not a relationship, or you cannot estimate a relationship between the software and good results. Not always.
Okay.
It's not directly related.
Could you explain the software part again? For the ground software?
So the software functionality, there is a huge survey questionnaire that was divided in 18 groups. Most of them were categorical variables, but they were also numerical variables. So we decided to use the multiple factor analysis. That it's a dimensional reduction methodology. So the idea of the multiple factor analysis is that you can separate the data, or it's useful when you have separated data in blocks as our, because it was in the questionnaire, and you also have these two kind of two types of variables. So we made a multiple factor analysis for each of the groups, and we see which were the variables that were most related with functionality, with hardware functionality. Okay? And then we realized that there were these four, so we made a final multiple factor analysis between the hardware functionality and these four groups of variables, and these were the results.
Okay.
Okay, and these scenarios you discussed, these are model runs of this model of
Yes.
the area of okay. So we run the model with say diminished precipitation.
Yes.
This transforms into availability, then you have an idea of this.
Yes.
So how do you make this area full blue?
Ah.
How do you improve the access?
It's complicated. Well, I think. Well, I would say I don't know.
One thing you
It would
said
be there if I.
was limiting was the depth of the wells.
Yes. Well, one thing is you can go deeper in the borehole, but this is not the only factor. It won't be just to do that, you know. Like, I think software functionality is actually really important. The way the management of the water points, it's community managed, and there is not network or support of the local authorities. It's very auto-gestioned. So maybe a more proper monitoring network could be useful in that area. And finance, of course. Well, for example, to deeper know that boreholes, you need a lot of financials that they don't have in these areas. So
Okay. Question, and I don't know whether there are questions in the online audience.
No.
No, there are no questions. Okay, thank you very much.